The night Tracy Carlson decides she is done being humiliated, she walks into a five-star restaurant to prove to herself she is over Tony Harris. Minutes later, with her ex smirking from across the room and a tattoo-throated stranger surrounded by bodyguards watching her every move, Tracy makes one reckless choice. She crosses the room, grabs the stranger by his lapels, and kisses him like she owns him, only to discover she has just claimed the attention of Valentino Moretti, a mafia boss who doesn't let anyone use his name for free. The clink of crystal and low murmur of conversation blurred into a dull hum as Tracy stepped into the dining room, the electric blue of her dress catching the chandelier light like a challenge. She had spent an hour convincing herself this was just dinner, just proof she could exist in the same city as Tony Harris without falling apart. Then she saw him. Tony sat near the center of the room, hand resting on the bare shoulder of a woman with flawless lipstick and the kind of empty laugh Tracy remembered faking for years. His head tipped back as he said something loud enough for nearby tables to hear, scanning for an audience the way he always did. When his gaze snagged on Tracy's, his mouth curved into a slow, satisfied smile that said he'd expected her to be alone. Heat crawled up her spine. Anger, shame, something sharp and wild. She refused to be the wounded ex in the corner. As she turned away, her eyes caught on another table, a man in a black suit, hair slicked back, ink curling up his neck above an open collar. For men in matching dark suits stood at a polite distance, not eating, not talking, just watching. The stranger's gaze met hers, steady and unreadable, as if weighing possibilities. Tracy felt something inside her snap into place. Before fear could argue, she lifted her chin and walked straight toward the most dangerous man in the room. "Welcome back, my beautiful family. I've truly missed all of you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for sticking with me. Your love and support mean everything." If you're excited for today's story and ready to soak it all in, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. Tomorrow, I've got another captivating story lined up for you, and believe me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. Tracy woke to the sound of her phone having a nervous breakdown on the nightstand. It buzzed, paused, buzzed again, a frantic insect trapped on the wood. Her head pounded, not hangover pounded, more like replay the scene until you want to scream pounded. She groaned, dragged the phone toward her, and squinted at the screen. 32 notifications. Group chats. Instagram tags. A string of missed calls from Tony. The first message she opened was from Clara. "Girl, are you alive? Why are you making out with a mobster in the middle of Le Chandelier?" Tracy's stomach dropped. Mobster. She laughed once, a dry, disbelieving sound. People just threw that word around. Rich guy. Security. Tattoos. Must be Mafia. Online, everything was a meme. She tapped open the attached video anyway. There she was, in grainy vertical footage, blue dress sharp against golden light, reaching up to grab the lapels of a man in a dark suit. The angle caught his tattooed throat, the chain at his neck, the ring on his finger. The kiss looked intentional, like they'd rehearsed it. The room around them blurred into a halo of faces and chandeliers, one table in the background showing Tony's expression twisting from smug to murderous. Heat flushed her skin. She fumbled out of bed, pacing barefoot across the small apartment. It had felt like survival in the moment. Now, in daylight, with breakfast crumbs still on the counter and a pile of unfolded laundry in the chair, it felt reckless and cinematic and unbearably stupid. Tony's name lit the screen again. She let it ring. It went to voicemail after the 5th call in a row. Then another notification, this time a voice message. Against better judgment, she hit play. "What the hell was that, Tracy?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You think you can use me to get attention, then humiliate me in front of half the city? Do you have any idea who that guy is? Call me back. Now." She deleted it before it finished, the echo of his fury still vibrating in her chest. Some part of her wanted to call, to explain, to minimize. It was nothing, Tony. Just a joke. You know me. I'd never. She caught herself, fingers tightening around the phone. Old habits, curling like smoke. A new notification flashed across the top of the screen. Unknown number. Ms. Carlson, this is a courtesy message. Mr. Moretti would like a word regarding last night's event. Car downstairs in 10 minutes. No please. No signature. Just inevitability. She walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. A black sedan idled at the curb, glossy and anonymous, exhaust curling into the morning air. A man in a dark suit leaned against the hood, hands folded in front of him, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. He wasn't scrolling his phone. He was just waiting. Tracy's heart kicked harder than it had for Tony's threats. She thought briefly about pretending she wasn't home, about texting back that they'd made a mistake. Wrong girl, sorry. But the video had been everywhere. Le Chandelier's staff. The people at the surrounding tables. The four silent men standing behind the stranger's chair. None of them had looked surprised by his authority. This wasn't the kind of man you ghosted. She dressed quickly, throwing on jeans and a sweater, then hesitated in front of the mirror. The woman who stared back looked unsettled, eyes still swollen from too little sleep, hair twisted into a messy knot. She wished, absurdly, that she'd had time to build armor again. The blue dress, the lipstick, the illusion of control. Instead, she grabbed her bag and phone and headed for the door. The suited man straightened when she stepped outside. Up close, he was younger than she'd expected, but his eyes held the same flat, professional calm she remembered from the bodyguards at the restaurant. "Miss Carlson?" he asked. "Yes." The word came out thinner than she liked. "Mr. Moretti appreciates punctuality." He opened the rear door of the sedan. "Please." She hovered for a heartbeat, the urge to run battling with cold curiosity. Last night, she had used a stranger as a weapon against her ex. This morning, the stranger had decided the weapon owed him something. Tracy slid into the car. The door shut with a muted, final click, sealing her inside the cool leather and faint scent of expensive cologne. As the sedan pulled away from the curb, she realized that whatever waited at the other end of this ride wasn't a hangover conversation she could charm her way out of. It was an accounting, and Valentino Moretti looked like a man who always collected. The second time Tracy saw Valentino Moretti, there was no chandeliers, no audience, no stage to perform on, just glass, chrome, and the unnerving quiet of his office high above the city. They'd ridden the elevator in silence, her squeezed between two suited men who looked like they were born with earpieces. The ride had been smooth, too smooth, like the building itself was trying not to draw attention. When the doors opened, they stepped straight into a space that felt more like a command center than an office. Dark wood, a wall of windows, shelves lined with leather folders instead of books. Valentino stood by the glass, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms. Daylight made him look different than the restaurant had, harder, less cinematic. The tattoos disappeared beneath his collar, but the impression of them remained, like a shadow you couldn't unsee. "Miss Carlson," he said without turning around. "Please, sit." She didn't. Her fingers clenched around the strap of her bag. "Is this the part where you lecture me about boundaries?" she asked lightly. "Or send me a bill for emotional damages?" He faced her then, mouth tugging the slightest bit. "No. This is the part where I try to keep you alive." The joke she'd been reaching for died in her throat. "I'm not in danger," she said automatically. "It was just a kiss. The internet will forget by next week." "Your ex will not." Valentino moved to the desk, picked up a tablet, and slid it across the smooth surface toward her. "He called the restaurant 3 times last night. Then the manager. Then one of my people." He met her eyes. Men like that don't enjoy losing face. Tracy glanced at the screen. Grainy security footage showed Tony in the foyer of Le Chandelier, jaw tight, gestures sharp. Even without sound, she could imagine the tone perfectly. Charming. Reasonable. Dangerous underneath. Her chest tightened. "He's just angry. He'll cool off." "Has he ever cooled off?" Valentino asked softly. That landed. Old memories flashed. Raised voices behind closed doors, shattered glass, apologies that came wrapped in expensive gifts and justifications. She looked away, focusing on the skyline instead. "I can handle Tony," she insisted, though it sounded thin even to her own ears. "I'm sure you can," Valentino said. "But the problem is bigger than him now." He leaned against the desk, arms folding across his chest. "Last night, in front of a room full of people who matter, you put my name and your face in the same sentence. Whether you intended it or not, that means something in my world." She bristled. "I didn't use your name at all." "You used my mouth," he replied, deadpan. It was an effective substitution. Heat climbed her neck. "So, what? You're mad I messed up your brand?"
Mad.
He considered that.
No.
Mildly inconvenienced. Unexpectedly entertained. A beat, then his gaze sharpened. "And now responsible." Responsible for what? "For making sure the woman half the room thinks belongs to me doesn't get cornered in a parking garage by a jealous ex-boyfriend or a man who wants leverage." His tone stayed calm, but there was steel beneath it. "That's bad optics." "Optics," she repeated, tasting the word. "So, I'm a PR nightmare, basically." "A solvable one." He straightened. "I'm assigning you a driver and rotating security. Discreet. You go where you want, do what you want. They make sure you get home in one piece." The instinctive no shot up immediately. "I don't need babysitters." "They're not babysitters." His voice cooled by a degree. "They're the difference between people thinking twice before approaching you and people assuming you're an easy way to get my attention." She opened her mouth, closed it again. The idea of shadowy men following her to the grocery store, to her office, to her tiny apartment, it scraped against everything in her that still wanted to prove she wasn't fragile. She'd fought hard for independence after Tony. Being escorted everywhere felt like a step backward. But another image rose just as quickly. Tony's face in the footage, tight with humiliated fury. The way he'd sounded on voicemail. The way he'd looked the few times he'd truly lost control. "Is this optional?" she asked slowly. "Or an order?" Valentino studied her for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth she could handle. "If you walk out of here and refuse, I won't drag you back," he said. "I don't own you, Tracy." He paused, the slightest emphasis on the word. "But it would make my life considerably simpler if you allowed me to protect you." There it was, the subtle claim, wrapped in practicality. He didn't say you're mine, but the implication threaded between every word. "People already think you are." She exhaled, feeling the tug of two selves. The Tracy who'd finally moved into her own place, who paid her own bills, who didn't have to report to anyone. And the Tracy who had spent too many nights checking locks twice because she knew exactly how bad Tony could get when he felt mocked. "Temporary," she said at last. "If I say yes, it's temporary. Until things cool down." His mouth curved, the smallest victory. "Temporary," he agreed. "We'll revisit when you're not receiving threats." "I'm not receiving." He raised a brow. "Yet," she amended, grimacing. A knock sounded at the door. One of the suited men from the ride-up stepped in. "Car's ready, boss." Valentino nodded, without looking away from her. "This is John Allen," he said. "For now, he's yours." "Great," Tracy muttered. "I've always wanted my own personal shadow." Valentino's gaze softened just a fraction. "Think of it as insurance," he said. "You've already started a war, Bella. The least I can do is make sure you survive it." She tried not to react to the endearment, to the quiet certainty in his voice. This was about safety, she reminded herself. Optics. Logistics. Still, when she followed John out of the office, the oddest thing happened. The knot of anxiety in her chest loosened, not because she wanted a man's protection, but because for the first time in a long time, if Tony came for her, she wouldn't be standing alone. The first time Tracy realized the bodyguards had a sense of humor was 3 days into being temporarily insured. John waited by her apartment door every morning, a dark-suited shadow with a polite nod and a travel mug that always smelled like better coffee than hers. At first she resented him on principle. By day 3, when a group of teenagers on scooters catcalled her and he wordlessly positioned himself between them and the curb with all the subtlety of a brick wall, She started to see the appeal. "They're not going to kidnap me for TikTok," she muttered as they reached the car. "You'd be surprised what people do for views," John said, deadpan, and opened the door. Tonight, instead of heading straight to her place after work, the car veered toward the river. Tracy glanced at John. "That's not my street." "Mr. Moretti requested your presence," he said. "Short notice. Apologies." She wanted to say no. She really did. But curiosity had been gnawing at her since the office. About him, about the world she'd accidentally stepped into. "Fine," she said. "But if this is an ambush intervention about my life choices, I'm leaving." "Wouldn't dream of it," John replied, and she could have sworn there was the hint of a smile. They pulled up behind Le Chandelier. Not the glittering front entrance this time, but the service alley, where delivery trucks and staff smoking breaks lived. Inside, the back corridors buzzed with quiet efficiency, servers in white shirts, kitchen staff barking orders, the smells of garlic and butter, and something rich she couldn't name. Valentino was in the small office off the kitchen, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He stood shoulder to shoulder with a restaurant manager, going over a clipboard. When he saw her in the doorway, something in his face shifted. Less mask, more man. "Tracy, come in." He dismissed the manager with a nod. "I thought you might like to see the other side of the chandeliers." She folded her arms. "Is this a tour or a sales pitch?" "Depends how much you enjoy it." He gestured toward the bustle outside. "This place is one of mine. On paper and otherwise. I keep it running, it keeps certain people fed, and certain people happy. Symbiosis." "Nice word," she said. "Did you practice that for me?" "A little," he admitted, and that honesty disarmed her more than the flattery. They walked through the kitchen together. Cooks shouted greetings. "Boss." Without flinching under his gaze. Valentino paused twice, once to check on a younger line cook's bandaged hand, once to taste a sauce and suggest a tweak, not as a tyrant, but like someone who knew the work. "You actually care if the food's good," Tracy said, surprised. "If the food is bad, people talk," he replied. "If people talk, I hear it. I prefer compliments." "That's not what I meant." He glanced at her, then away. "These people pay their rent with what they earn here. I learned early that fear keeps a place quiet, but respect keeps it standing." It was a small sentence, almost tossed off, yet something raw edged the last word. She wondered who had taught him that lesson the hard way and how many scars it left. They ended up in the empty dining room, pre-service, chandeliers dimmed to soft glows. Without the crowd, the space felt almost intimate. Staff moved between tables, adjusting cutlery with ruler-straight precision. A server nearly collided with Valentino, then froze, eyes wide. "Sorry, Mr. Moretti," she blurted. Valentino steadied her tray before it tipped. "Slow down, Daniela. Glass is cheaper than bone." When she hurried off, Tracy murmured, "You know all their names?" "As many as I can," he said. "People work harder for someone who sees them." "You're really ruining my convenient stereotype of you," she said. "I had you filed under villain in a three-piece suit." He laughed quietly, a warm, low sound. "Don't put the file away yet." They sat at a corner table while the room hummed around them. He ordered them both espresso and a dessert off menu. When the plate arrived, layered pastry, glistening with honey, he slid it between them. "Bribery?" she asked. "Cultural exchange," he corrected. "You tell me about your world. I tell you about mine." So she did. She talked about her job, about impossible deadlines and petty office politics, about the freelance design gigs she took at night to afford her apartment. He listened like it mattered, occasionally asking pointed questions that made her realize how rarely anyone took her ambitions seriously. In return, he offered glimpses, not confessions, stories about growing up in a cramped apartment above a bakery, about being sent to resolve misunderstandings before he was old enough to drive, about a father who measured love in expectations. "It's not an excuse," he said at one point, eyes on his untouched espresso. "Just context." She believed him. Or maybe she just wanted to. At some point, she made a joke about needing a loyalty card for surviving near-death emotional experiences. He snorted, then reached into his pocket and slid a sleek black card across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Reservation line," he said. "You ever need a table here, anywhere I own, you call that number. Skip the waiting list." She turned it over, eyebrows lifting. "This is either the nicest thing anyone's ever done for my social life or the most elaborate way to stalk me. Can it be both?" His eyes glinted. "Dangerous answer." "We live dangerously." His gaze held hers, the air between them thickening. She felt the memory of his mouth on hers like a phantom heat. She cleared her throat, looked away. "This is nice," she said, seeing this side. "I didn't expect that I might be human," he supplied. "That you might be complicated," she corrected. He smiled, softer this time. "Stay long enough, Tracy, and you'll find I'm annoyingly consistent in my contradictions." She laughed, then genuinely. And as she walked back through the kitchen later, John falling into step beside her, she realized the tight, defensive knot in her chest had loosened even more. Valentino Moretti was still dangerous. Still wrong for her on paper. Still surrounded by men who carried guns instead of planners. But somewhere between the back door and the chandeliers, he'd become something else too. A man she was starting to like. The notification hit while Tracy was halfway through her second coffee, staring blankly at a logo revision that refused to cooperate. Her phone lit the corner of her desk with a familiar group chat ping, Clara's name floating at the top. "Did you see what Tony posted?" Her stomach clenched. She flicked over to social media, thumb moving faster than her brain. Tony's profile sat at the top of the algorithm's altar, as if the internet itself was in on the drama. The latest post was a carousel, photos she didn't remember anyone taking. First slide, Tracy at Le Chandelier's bar, the blue dress, the martini, the tight line of her mouth. Second, a freeze frame of the kiss, her hands in Valentino's suit, his inked neck exposed, his face turned just enough to show the sharp line of his jaw. Third, a cropped shot of her getting into the black sedan outside her building 2 nights later, John holding the door. The caption read, "Some people move on. Some people trade up to the mob. Prayers up for the next poor sucker." Comments stacked under it, laughing emojis, gossip, people tagging friends. A few defended her. Most didn't. Words like gold digger and psycho and mafia groupie flickered past in neon cruelty. Heat crawled up her neck. She could practically hear Tony's smug tone, how he'd spin this as concern. "Just worried about her choices, man. She's gotten into some bad stuff." "Hey." Clara's message popped up again. "I'm on your side, okay? But maybe don't check Twitter." Too late. A trending hashtag already floated near the top. Screenshots of Tony's post. Speculation threads. Someone had zoomed in on Valentino's tattoos and was enthusiastically connecting him to every crime family Google could cough up. Tracy's vision blurred. Shame and anger tangled in her chest, tight as barbed wire. This was what she'd done to herself. One kiss, one reckless moment, and now the entire city thought she was sleeping with a gangster for status. Her phone buzzed with another incoming call. Not Tony this time. Valentino. For a second she considered letting it ring out. He was the reason this had teeth. If he'd just been some random banker, Tony's post would still have been cruel, but not dangerous. She answered. "Is there a corporate policy about ruining a girl's life? Or is that improvisation?" "Good afternoon to you too," he said, voice calm. "I assume you've seen Harris's little performance." "Oh, we're calling it a performance? I thought it was character assassination." Her laugh came out sharp. "Congratulations, by the way. You're officially internet famous." "I was aiming for infamous, but I'll take what I can get." A pause. "Where are you?" "At work. Trying to pretend I'm not the main character of a trashy thread." She lowered her voice, aware of coworkers whispering a few desks over. "My boss saw it. HR saw it. I might actually lose my job over this." "That won't happen," he said immediately. "You can't know that." "No," he agreed. "But I can make sure your boss understands that firing you would be unwise." There was again that casual use of power, like muscle memory. Once, she might have found it comforting. Now it made something cold settle in her bones. I don't want you leaning on my boss, she said. I already have one man trying to control my narrative. I don't need another. Silence hummed between them. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its lazy edge. Come to the office, he said. We'll talk properly.
She almost said no.
Almost told him to deal with Tony however he liked and leave her out of it. But the thing about fires was that ignoring them didn't make them smaller. Fine, she said. But this time, I want actual answers. In his office, the city stretched endlessly behind him, gray and glittering. He dismissed John with a nod when she walked in, leaving them alone. You look tired, he observed. You look like someone who knew this was coming, she shot back, tossing her phone onto his desk so the ugly carousel glared up at them. Tell me, was there any part of last week where you thought, hey, maybe I should warn her that kissing me is basically inviting a war? His gaze flicked to the screen, then back. Would you have listened? I'm listening now. He studied her, the faintest crack appearing in his composure. This is my world, Tracy. It moves whether you're in it or not. You stepped onto the board. Harris is simply using the available pieces. I'm not a piece, she said quietly. I'm a person. A person who is apparently one viral post away from being collateral damage. Something in his jaw tightened. I am aware. Are you? She dragged in a breath, forcing herself not to look away. Because I need to know what exactly I'm standing next to. Not the restaurant owner. Not the charming guy who knows everyone's name. I mean the man Tony is hinting at. The one people online are whispering about like you're a ghost story. He leaned back, fingers steepled. For the first time since she'd met him, he seemed to weigh his words instead of weaponizing them. What do you want to know? He asked. Have you hurt people? The question hung between them, heavy. Not theoretically. Not my guys did things.
You.
Have you ordered things that got people killed? Have you done it yourself? His eyes didn't flinch. Yes. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her. You're not even going to lie. You asked me not to, he said simply. You said you didn't want to be blind again. She hated that. Hated the part of her that respected it. How many? Enough that I stopped counting, he said. Not enough that I stopped remembering faces. Why? Because sometimes, he said, the alternative is letting someone else put a bullet in your sister's car, or your employee's head, or turning a street you grew up on into an open grave. This world has rules. I didn't write them. But if I don't play by them, someone with fewer lines they won't cross will. And what are your lines? She pressed. His gaze locked on hers.
Children, he said first.
Innocents. People who work for me and keep their agreements. Anyone under my protection.
A beat.
You now, apparently. You can't say that like it's a joke. It's not. His voice softened. Believe me, I understand why you're afraid. You should be. I'm not a good man by most definitions. But I am not a random monster either. He tapped Tony's post with one finger. This is petty cruelty. I've never pretended that what I do is nice. Only that it is necessary in the life I was given. And if I decide I don't want that life anywhere near mine, she asked. For a moment, the mask slipped entirely. The space behind his eyes looked older than his body, tired in a way money couldn't fix. Then you walk, he said. I won't stop you. I won't punish you. The admission seemed to cost him something. But I can't promise Harris, or anyone else, will give you the same courtesy if I'm not between you. Trust, she realized, wasn't some abstract romantic concept here. It was triage. It was choosing which danger she believed in more. I need time, she said, voice rough, to decide if staying close to you makes me safer or just dirtier. He nodded once, slow. Take it, he said. But do me one favor while you're deciding.
What?
If you think I'm lying to you, walk because of that, he said. Not because of what people like Harris choose to shout from the cheap seats. She picked up her phone, the carousel winking mockingly from the screen, and slipped it into her bag. When she left, she didn't let him see that her hands were shaking. The rain came in sheets the night Tracy decided that if she was going to drown, she might as well know how deep the water really was. She stood in the lobby of Valentino's building, damp hair curling at her temples, palms slick on the strap of her bag. John had offered an umbrella. She'd refused. There was something fitting about walking into this conversation already soaked. Valentino was waiting in the same office as before, but the mood felt different. No jacket, no tie, shirt open at the throat, like he'd been working late and she'd interrupted something real instead of a performance. Papers were spread across the desk, columns of numbers, property maps, names highlighted in neat strokes. Tracy. His gaze scanned her quickly, a flicker of concern at the wet sleeves, before he smoothed it away. You could have called. I would have sent the car. I didn't want the car, she said. I wanted this. She gestured between them, then to the desk. All of this. One dark brow lifted. All of this is rather a lot. Good. She took a breath. Because I'm done guessing. I'm done letting other people fill in the blanks. Tony, the internet, your enemies. If I'm going to decide whether to stay anywhere near you, I need to see what I'm actually choosing. He watched her for a long moment, the silence stretching. This was the part where he could smile, deflect, tell her it was better she didn't know. Part of her almost hoped he would. It would make walking away easier. Instead, he said, "All right," and picked up his keycard. The elevator this time didn't go up but down. Past the lobby, past the parking levels, into a floor with no button. The doors opened onto a hallway that smelled faintly of paper, metal, and strong coffee. The lighting was softer than she expected. Less bunker, more quiet co-working space, if co-working spaces came with armed men and reinforced doors. This is one of the offices, Valentino said as they walked. You won't see everything tonight. There is no tour package for the full experience, but you'll see enough. They passed glass-fronted rooms where people sat at desks, eyes flicking to screens and ledgers. In one, Clementina Boney argued with a bank on speakerphone about wire transfers, voice cool and lethal. In another, Anna Maria Pisano plotted routes on a map, colored pins marking arteries of the city Tracy had never noticed. Legitimate businesses?
Tracy asked.
Mostly, he said. Distribution. Logistics. Real estate. The rest. He nodded toward a door with no window, 2 men stationed outside. Some conversations are still better had without a paper trail. He led her into a larger room dominated by a table covered in files. Edgardo Picho and Ricardo Monaldo were there, mid-discussion, but they straightened when they saw her. Boss, Edgardo said. His gaze flicked to Tracy, curious but not disrespectful. You sure? I'm sure, Valentino said. Continue. They didn't nod in English. They switched to rapid Italian, pointing to names on a page, suppliers, politicians, rival captains. Tracy didn't understand the words, but she understood the rhythm. Deals. Favors.
Threats.
An entire city balanced on leverage. Translation? She asked quietly. Territory disputes, Valentino said. A nightclub owner who thinks he can take protection from my people and then invite someone else into the neighborhood. If I let it slide, next month there are 5 more like him. And then someone decides my men are optional. Optional becomes expendable. Expendable becomes dead. And what do? She asked. He met her eyes. Convince him that agreements matter. If he's smart, he apologizes and pays. If he's stupid, he spread his hands. I reassign the nightclub. And someone else learns to be punctual with their envelopes. She absorbed that, the casual brutality beneath the polite phrasing. No screaming. No theatrics. Just cause and effect. He showed her spreadsheets next, lines of income from restaurants, trucking companies, construction firms. Interspersed between them were cash flows that had no neat public explanation. Money that needs to become other kinds of money, he said. We make sure it does so quietly. In return, we get loyalty. Information. Favors called favors, not bribes, but the result is the same. And you sleep at night? She asked. On good nights. His mouth twitched. On bad ones, I count the ways it could all fall apart if I stopped paying attention for 5 minutes. There was vulnerability there, thin but real. Not an apology, but an admission. This life cost him, too. They ended up in a smaller room off the main floor, quieter, with a single window high on the wall. A map of the city covered one side, dotted with pins and notes. Her neighborhood was on there. Her building. A tiny blue mark. "You've been watching me this whole time," she said. "Yes," he answered, no hesitation. "Since the kiss. Since before Harris started shouting. One of the first rules. Know where your liabilities sleep." "Liabilities," she repeated, tasting it. "And assets," he added. "The line between those is fluid." She leaned against the table, suddenly exhausted. "So this is it. This is who you are. No more curated restaurant tours, no more charming half-truths. This is part of who I am," he said. "The part that keeps the rest standing. And you wanted me to see it because—" "Because you asked," he said. "Because if you stay near me and don't understand, that's on me. Because I am very tired of pretending for people who only ever cared about the illusion." He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that his cologne wrapped around her, familiar and unnervingly comforting now. "You can leave tonight and never come back," he said quietly. "You can decide I'm exactly what they say I am and go build a life far away from all of this. I won't stop you." "What do you want?" she asked. "Not what you'll allow. What do you want?" He exhaled, a slow surrender. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not because you're a useful optic, not because it irritates Harris. Because when you walk into a room, this place feels a little less like a prison I inherited and more like a choice." Heat rose behind her eyes at that, unexpected and unwelcome. "This isn't romantic, Valentino," she said. "These ledgers, these men. It's blood and math." "I know," he said. "That's why I brought you here. If you stay, it has to be with your eyes open. Both of them." She thought of Tony, of how she'd once accepted his edits of reality because the alternative, seeing him clearly, would have meant leaving. She thought of the internet idiots calling her a groupie. She thought of the way Valentino had said I have hurt people without flinching away from it. "I don't know yet what I'm going to do," she said. "But I know this. If I walk away, it won't be because you lied." Something in his shoulders eased, the barest fraction. "Then we have progress," he said. She huffed a laugh. "You show me your criminal empire and call it progress. You're insane." "Possibly," he agreed. "But now you're the one who asked to see the inside of the cage." She looked around at the maps, the screens, the busy hum of controlled chaos beyond the door. A cage, yes, but also a throne room, a war room, a place where decisions rippled outward into 1,000 unseen lives. And somewhere in the center of it stood a man who had taken off his armor, just a little, and handed her the blade that could cut him. The bar where Tracy met Clara for emergency drinks was loud enough that she could almost pretend the buzz in her veins was just from the tequila. Clara, however, looked stone-cold sober, fingers white around her glass. "You're not going to like this," she said, leaning in so she didn't have to shout over the music. "Which is why I almost didn't tell you. But then I remembered I'm not trash." "That's an encouraging preface," Tracy said, forcing a smile. What did Tony do now? Release a director's cut of the smear post? Clara shook her head, curls bouncing. "This isn't online. It's worse." She lowered her voice further. "My cousin Greg works at some awful club downtown, the one with the LED ceiling? Anyway, he texted me last night. Said Tony was there, drunk and bragging about finally getting leverage on the tattooed psycho." Tracy's stomach dipped. "Valentino, do you know any other tattooed psychos?" Clara asked. Greg said Tony was flashing screenshots of emails. Stuff about security routes, delivery schedules, who's where and when. To guys who did not look like club rats. The music faded into a dull roar in Tracy's ears. "He's selling information."
"Yeah."
To some dudes Greg swears were not cops. He only caught one name, Lucia something, and a guy they called Rizzo. Clara grimaced. He said it felt organized. Lucius. Rizzo. The name slotted into place with a cold click. People she'd heard murmured in that basement office, on maps and ledgers and lines of red string. She gripped the edge of the table. "When?" "Last night. Greg said Tony promised more later in the week if they liked what he gave them." Clara touched her hand. Tracy, you need to tell your whatever he is to you. This feels bad. Every instinct screamed agreement. The other part of her, the one that still remembered broken glass, slammed doors, the way Tony could turn anything around and make her feel crazy, whispered that this was exactly how far gone she'd become. Running to a Mafia boss to protect him. Complicit. She drained her drink, tasting only heat. I have to go, she said. Valentino was in the war room when she arrived, sleeves rolled. Enzo and Edgardo hunched over a map. Conversation snapped off when she appeared in the doorway. For once, Tracy didn't hesitate. We have a problem, she said. Tony's selling you out. 3 sets of eyes landed on her. Valentino's attention felt like stepping under a spotlight. Explain, he said.
She did.
The club.
Greg.
The names. Every detail Clara had given her, laid out like evidence. Halfway through, she realized her hands were shaking and forced them still. When she finished, silence settled. Enzo swore softly in Italian. Edgardo muttered something about that gambling fool finally picking a side. Valentino's jaw worked once. You're sure? He asked. As sure as I can be without a subpoena, she replied. If he's telling the truth, they know your outs. Your routines. When you're most exposed. She met his gaze head-on. You need to move. Change everything. Instead of barking orders, he studied her. You came straight here. Yes. You considered not coming. Yes, she said again, because anything else would be an insult after what he'd shown her downstairs. Telling you feels like being part of this. Of you. And that scares me. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, pride, something tangled. And yet you're here. Because if something happens to you because of him, and I said nothing, she said, I have to live with that. I already have enough ghosts. The corner of his mouth twitched, but he didn't look away. Understood. He turned to the table, switching languages, voice clipped and efficient. Orders spilled out. Reroute this, cancel that, move the vulnerable pieces off the board. Enzo nodded, already dialing. Edgardo started dragging markers across the map, erasing paths, drawing new ones. And Harris? Enzo asked. You want him gone? Tracy's heart tripped. She hadn't thought this far. Of course they'd ask. In this world, traitors didn't get strongly worded emails. Valentino's gaze flicked back to her, just for a second. It was quick, but she caught the question in it. What can you live with? Not gone, he said finally. Not yet. I want him contained. Quiet. I want to know everyone he's talked to, everything he's given. We squeeze him until there's nothing left to leak, then we decide how generous we feel. That's riskier, Enzo warned. I'm aware. Valentino's tone left no room for argument. Have Leonide and John handle it. No broken bones. No headlines. He was choosing a slower, messier path. Not because it was safer for him, but because it was survivable for her. When they were alone again, Tracy let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. You didn't have to do that, she said. Do what? Show restraint. Ask for the long version instead of the permanent one. I didn't do it for Harris, he said. He earned worse. His gaze softened. But I'm trying something new. What's that? Considering what you will see when you look at me afterward. Her chest tightened. That's a lot of weight to put on one pair of eyes. Then stay near enough to keep using them, he said. You warned me in time to move my people. That makes us even more than I'd like to admit. We're not even, she said. We're in it. He smiled, small and real. Yes, he said. We are. The chandeliers were brighter than she remembered, a galaxy of crystal hanging over a room full of people pretending not to stare. Tracy smoothed a hand down the dark green fabric of her dress, more nervous about tripping in her heels than about being on Valentino's arm. Or so she told herself. Cameras flashed quietly at the entrance. The charity gala had the kind of guest list that made society pages salivate. Old money, new money, and the kind of money that never wanted to be traced. Valentino's hand rested at the small of her back, warm through the thin fabric. You're sure about this? He murmured, low enough that only she could hear. You mean, am I sure I want to walk into a room full of people who read the same gossip sites I do and pretend I'm not the headline? She forced a smile. Absolutely not. But I'm here anyway. His mouth curved. Brave and honest. You're spoiling me. They made a circuit of the room. Donors, politicians, business owners who shook Valentino's hand with both deference and deniability. To each, he introduced her simply as Tracy, nothing more. No labels. No explanations. It shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. John and Leonide lingered at the edges of her vision, blending into the wallpaper in their identical suits. Part of her bristled at the constant watchfulness. Another, quieter part relaxed. 2 months ago, she would have walked into a place like this alone and prayed Tony didn't show up just to twist the knife. Tonight, Tony was nowhere to be seen. His damage had already been done. Halfway through the auction, as some limited edition painting climbed into obscene numbers, Tracy leaned toward Valentino. Tell me we're not bidding on that. Relax, he said. I already own something better. Oh, what's that? He looked at her, and for once there was no joke in it. A functioning conscience. She was still processing that when the first shot cracked through the room. For a heartbeat, everyone froze, trying to fit the sound into their understanding of the night. Champagne popping. Something dropped. Then the second shot came, shattering a crystal sconce, and the gala dissolved into chaos. Someone screamed. Glass rained down. The auctioneer vanished behind the podium. Tracy's body reacted before her brain caught up. She flinched, clutching Valentino's arm. Down, he snapped, pushing her toward the floor as John and Leonide seemed to materialize at their sides. More shots, closer now. The chandeliers swayed gently, scattering fractured light over overturned chairs. From the corner of her eye, Tracy saw figures moving against a current of panicked guests, men in server uniforms, but their hands held guns instead of trays. Kitchen doors, Leonide barked. They're trying to funnel us. Valentino's eyes swept the room, calculating. Back corridor, he said.
Now.
John stepped in front of them, a human shield. They moved in a low crouch, Valentino's hand a vice around Tracy's wrist, bodies surging around them like a stampede. Someone stumbled, knocking into her. She nearly went down, but his grip held. A bullet hit the wall inches from her head, spraying plaster. She gasped, pulling closer to his side. Fear wanted to curl her into a ball on the floor. Another, sharper instinct shoved through. Move or die. They were almost to the side exit when the nearest gunman turned, spotting them. His expression shifted, recognition, opportunity. He raised his weapon. John moved faster than thought, pivoting to block the shot. The impact slammed into him. He grunted, staggering back into Tracy. They both went down hard. The air knocked from her lungs. John, she choked. Blood spread across the back of his jacket, dark against the fabric. The gunman adjusted his aim, stepping toward them. Time narrowed to a tunnel. Tracy's hand closed around the fallen champagne stand beside her. Without thinking, she swung. Metal met shin with a sickening crack. The man shouted, stumbling. His shot went wild, taking out another chandelier instead of a skull. Get up, she yelled at John, even as she knew he couldn't. Come on, big guy, don't you dare. Valentino was there a second later, gun drawn from nowhere, his face carved in ice. 2 shots, precise, and the attacker crumpled, weapon skittering across the floor. Leonide grabbed it, checking the room for more. Can you move? Valentino's voice was razor-sharp as he knelt beside John. Yeah. John ground out, face pale.
Winged, not dead.
Feels like a truck, though. Tracy. Valentino turned to her, hands skimming her arms, her sides, checking for blood. Are you hit? She shook her head, heart pounding so hard her chest hurt. I'm fine. He's not. Valentino's men moved to lift John, but Tracy was already grabbing his other arm, helping haul him up. I've got him, she said. Just tell me where we're going. Valentino stared at her for a fraction of a second, at the blood on her hands, the stubborn set of her jaw, the way she braced her shoulder under John's weight like she'd carried men twice his size all her life. Service corridor, he said finally. Ambulance on standby. Leon-eyed cover. We move on 3. They went, stumbling and half running through the back hallway, the sounds of chaos fading behind them. Only when they burst through the rear exit into the cold night air did Tracy realize she was shaking. The ambulance lights painted the alley in blue and red. Medics swarmed John, cutting through his jacket, talking fast. Tracy stepped back, suddenly unsteady now that adrenaline was ebbing. A warm hand closed around her wrist, then slid up to her shoulder. Valentino turned her gently until they were face to face. "You were supposed to run when the shooting started," he said. His voice was quiet, but there was a rawness in it she'd never heard before. "Not attack a gunman with bar equipment." "It worked," she said, voice hoarse. "You're welcome." Tracy. Her name sounded different on his tongue this time. Less teasing, more prayer. Up close, she could see the fine tremor in his fingers, barely contained. "You could have died." "So could you," she shot back. "So could John. I wasn't going to crawl under a table while someone executed the people keeping me alive." He closed his eyes briefly, as if trying to swallow something too big. When he opened them again, the last of the distance was gone. "You're not the people to me," he said. "Do you understand that? This isn't about optics or pride anymore." His hand tightened on her shoulder, anchoring. "If something happens to you because you're standing next to me, there is no version of my life I want to live after that." The words stole what little breath she had left. Somewhere behind them, a medic called out John's blood pressure, sirens wailed, glass crunched under boots. The world felt suddenly small, just his eyes, the alley, the knowledge that they'd both almost lost this without ever naming it. She reached up, fingers brushing the line of his jaw, the faint stubble there. "Then maybe," she said softly, "we stop pretending this is something it's not." His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes, searching for any hint of doubt. Finding none, he bent and kissed her. Not like the first time, all theater and defiance, but like a man who just walked through hell and found the one thing on the other side that made the fire worth it. This time, there were no chandeliers. Just sirens and broken glass and the sharp, undeniable realization that whatever came next, they were already in it together. The safe house didn't look like a safe house. That was the first thing Tracy thought when she stepped inside. No barred windows, no peeling paint, no cramped panic room. Just high ceilings, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling glass, and the kind of minimalist furniture that made her nervous to sit down. The air smelled faintly of citrus and linen, like a hotel that had never known an overbooked weekend. "This is temporary," Valentino said behind her. "A place to breathe while we decide the next moves."
"We, not I."
The words snagged in her chest. She walked to the windows. Below, the city stretched out in neat lines, traffic moving as if nothing had happened. No bullets, no shattered chandeliers, no man bleeding onto her dress while she yelled at him to stay awake. She could still feel the phantom weight of John's body slumped against her shoulder, hear the crack of glass exploding overhead. "How is he?" she asked quietly. "Stable," Valentino said. "Surgery went well. He's complaining about hospital food, so I'm optimistic." She exhaled, tension loosening a notch. "Good. I'd hate to be the reason he lost his job and his spleen." "You're the reason he still has both," Valentino said. "Don't rewrite that." Silence settled between them, thick with everything unsaid. She could feel him watching her, measuring. "Tracy," he began, and something in his tone made her turn. He was holding a slim folder, the expensive kind, like everything else in his orbit. He laid it on the table between them, fingers tapping once on the cover before withdrawing, as if it might burn. "What's that?" she asked. "An exit," he said. Her pulse stumbled. "For who?" "You." He opened the folder, revealing a neat stack of documents. "New identification. Bank account in your name only. Apartment lease in a different city, Vancouver, if you want colder winters. There's a job offer from a design firm that owes me a favor and a ticket booked under the new name." She stared at the papers as if they might rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. "You planned this." "After the ambush." His voice was steady, but his hands betrayed him, fingers lacing together too tightly. It was a reminder that no matter how careful I am, some of the bullets meant for me will always aim for whoever's standing next to me. I won't pretend otherwise. She picked up the passport, flipped it open. Different name, different life. Her face, but not thorough. I don't do halfway measures. He stepped back, as if distance might make the choice easier. If you take this, Tony can't touch you. My enemies won't have a name or an address. You can be just Tracy again. Or whoever you want to be. And you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. He hesitated. I stay, he said. I finish what needs finishing. I try slowly to drag this operation into something that doesn't require body bags. Without looking over my shoulder every 5 minutes to see if the person I care about most has become collateral. The words hung there, naked and heavy. Person I care about most. Not tool. Not liability. Not even asset. You're really okay with that? She asked softly. With me disappearing? Never calling? Not knowing if I'm alive? No, he admitted. I hate every part of it. He met her gaze, nothing between them now. But I would rather lose you free than keep you caged and bleeding for my choices. It shouldn't have surprised her as much as it did. Valentino, who had built a life on control, was offering to cut himself out of hers. No leverage. No strings. Just a door. Fear rose, old and familiar. Every bad night with Tony. Every time she'd made herself smaller to keep a man calm. Every warning she'd whispered inside her own head about powerful men and the cost of loving them. But beneath it, something newer stirred. The memory of her own voice in that alley. I wasn't going to crawl under a table while someone executed the people keeping me alive. The feel of Valentino's hand shaking as he checked her for wounds. The way his eyes had looked when he said there is no version of my life I want to live after that. Her deepest fear, she realized, wasn't dying. It wasn't even Tony. It was living the rest of her life running away from him, from danger, from the possibility that she could want something this big and still be herself inside it. She set the passport down carefully. What happens if I stay? His jaw tensed, but he answered. We make different rules, he said. More distance between you and the ugly parts. More legitimate business, less street work. There will still be risk. People will still talk. He swallowed. But you get veto power. On where you live, what you see, what we build. You become not a shadow, but a partner. Partners, she repeated. The word felt dangerous and right. You'd be afraid, he said. Some days so would I. But we wouldn't lie to each other about why. She looked at the two futures on the table, one bound in paper, the other in the man staring at her like she held the trigger to his entire life. Do you love me? She asked. His breath left him in a rough exhale, as if she'd finally named the thing he'd been dodging. Yes, he said simply. Enough to let you go. More than enough to hope you don't. The panic that had been clawing at her ribcage receded, replaced by a strange, fierce calm. For the first time, loving a powerful man didn't feel like handing over the keys to her life. He wasn't asking for them. He was laying his own down next to hers and waiting to see if she'd pick them up. Tracy closed the folder. The sound was small, final. Call your design firm, she said. Tell them thanks, but I'm staying with my current nightmare of a client. His eyes searched hers. You're sure? No, she said and laughed, the sound shaky but real. But I'm done choosing safety over the truth. I want you. I want this messed up, dangerous, complicated life, as long as I get to walk into it on my own feet. Something in him broke then. In the best way, a crack in the armor that let warmth pour through. He stepped forward slowly, giving her time to change her mind. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized had fallen. Then we do it together, he said. On purpose this time. She leaned into his touch, into the terror and the relief and the wild, improbable hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have both. Love and herself. Outside, the city roared on, unaware that in a quiet room high above its streets, Two people had just chosen each other over every ghost trying to pull them apart. The brownstone didn't come with chandeliers. That was part of the appeal. 3 stories of brick and glass on a quiet Brooklyn street, ivy creeping up the front like it had all the time in the world. Inside, the ceilings were lower than any of Valentino's penthouses, the floors creaked in places, and the backyard was a rectangle of stubborn grass and one crooked tree. To Tracy, it looked like the opposite of a throne room. It looked like a life. She stood in the front room, hands on her hips, eyeing the blank wall where the fireplace used to be. Her laptop sat open on a crate masquerading as a coffee table, mood boards spilling across the screen, paint swatches, fabric textures, photos of spaces that were neither palace nor bunker. "You're glaring at that wall again," Valentino said from behind her. "Should I be jealous?" "Only if you think you can compete with reclaimed brick," she said. "I'm trying to decide if we knock it out and expose what's underneath, or fake it with veneer." He stepped up beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. "You're the expert. I just signed the checks." "Not anymore, you don't," she said, nudging him with her shoulder. "We agreed, joint account for the house, separate for everything else. I am not becoming a line item on your expense reports." He huffed a laugh. "You wound me. My spreadsheets will never recover." It had been 3 months since she'd closed the folder in the safe house. 3 months of watching him do the thing he'd promised, delegating, restructuring, pushing more and more of his people into legitimate work. Clubs turned into actual venues with licenses and tax forms. Shipping routes cleaned up. A charity foundation launched not as a front, but as something inspected, audited, annoyingly transparent. He was still who he was. Men in suits still reported to him. Some meetings still happened in rooms she didn't enter. But the balance had shifted, and she'd watched him fight for every inch of that shift, teeth bared against old habits and old loyalties. She'd been fighting too. For contracts under her own name. For a small design studio off Atlantic Avenue with peeling paint and huge windows that she was slowly transforming into a place where other people could build new futures too. When clients whispered about the rumors, she let them. Her work spoke louder. "Enzo called," Valentino said. "Rizzo's selling his shares, just like we planned. Leonide will handle the buyout. No more informal arrangements on that side of the river." "Look at you," she said, tilting her head to study him. "Fewer air quotes every week." "It's infuriating," he admitted. "Legitimacy comes with so much paperwork." "Luckily," she said, "you're sleeping with someone who finds filing systems sexy." He groaned. "You say that like I won't make you prove it later." She smiled, then sobered, turning back to the wall. "Are you sure you're okay with me turning this room into a studio?" she asked. "You could host half the city's elite in here. Throw impressive dinners. Intimidate politicians." "Why would I want politicians in my house?" he asked. "I see enough of them at the office." "Seriously." "Seriously," he said. "You wanted a space for your work. Our work. That takes precedence over my urge to posture." It still startled her sometimes how easy he made it sound. Not because it was easy, but because he decided she was worth the discomfort. Her phone buzzed on the crate, an email from the foundation board asking for her input on the design of a new community arts center. Not as Valentino's girlfriend, but as Tracy Carlson, creative director. She'd insisted on the title. He'd backed her in the meeting, silent and unmovable until the board nodded. She picked up the phone, then set it back down without opening the message. It could wait. For once, nothing felt like it might catch fire if she looked away. "You know what I don't miss?" she said. "The constant threat of assassination?" he offered. "Well, yes, but also being a prop. With Tony, it was all about how I looked on his arm. With you, it started that way and I let it. I liked the armor." She glanced at him. "I like this better." "What's this?" he asked. She gestured around them. "Arguing about tile. Co-signing mortgages. You asking me where to hang your ridiculous oil painting instead of just doing it." "It's not ridiculous," he protested. "My aunt painted that with her own hands. Your aunt gave it to you because no one else would take it." He laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. Moments like this had become their new currency. Not grand gestures, but 1,000 small negotiations that said we're building something, not just surviving it. Later that night, they ended up back at Le Chandelier, not the front, this time, but in a small private dining room off the main floor. Daniela had insisted they come test the new menu. Service was over. The chandeliers in the main hall were dimmed, leaving the restaurant in a soft, twilight glow. The private room was simple. One table, white cloth, candles instead of crystals. No crowd. No cameras. Just them. "This feels familiar," Tracy said, running a finger around the rim of her wine glass. "Less screaming, though." "Give it time," Valentino said. "The night is young." He watched her for a moment, something tender and awed in his gaze. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly, closing the folder. "Staying." She thought about everything they'd walked through: smear campaigns, gunfire, sleepless nights arguing over what could change and what couldn't. She thought about John dropping by the brownstone with his girlfriend and a bottle of wine, about Clara teasing Valentino until he actually blushed, about the way the staff at the restaurants greeted her now with respect instead of wary curiosity.
"No," she said.
"I regret the dress I wore to the gala, but not you." "Good," he said. "Because I have terrible news." "Oh." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her heartbeat stuttered, then raced ahead. "I was going to do this on a beach somewhere," he said. "Or in Sicily like my sisters wanted. But then I realized those are the places where I pretend to be someone else. Here," he gestured to the room, the muffled clink of dishes being stacked outside. "This is ours. Chandeliers and gunshots and all." Her throat tightened. "You don't have to." "I know," he said. "That's the point." He opened the box. The ring inside wasn't subtle. Nothing about their lives was, but it was elegant. A single stone, set low, flanked by a design that reminded her of the ink on his neck. "Tracy Carlson," he said, voice steady in a way his hands weren't. "Will you keep choosing me? Not just tonight, but on the mornings when I'm buried in contracts and you're fighting with suppliers, on the days when the past feels heavier than usual, on the nights when we're too tired to be anything but honest." Tears blurred her vision, turning the candle flames into smears of gold. She reached across the table, closing the box with her hand, trapping his fingers under hers. "Yes," she said. "On one condition." His mouth twitched. "Only one." "Fine, several, but we'll start with this. No more calling it my world and your world. It's ours now. We get to decide what it looks like." He nodded, emotion flickering across his face.
"Deal," he said.
She stood, moving around the table. He rose to meet her. When he slid the ring onto her finger, his hands finally stopped shaking. Their kiss was slow, unhurried, nothing like the first one under the chandeliers or the desperate one in the alley. No audience. No danger clawing at the edges. Just two people who knew exactly what they were walking into and chose each other anyway. When they pulled apart, Tracy rested her forehead against his. "You realize," she murmured, "that for the rest of our lives, every time we fight about something stupid, I will remind you that I could have been living a quiet, drama-free life in Vancouver." He smiled, a real, helpless thing. "I look forward," he said, "to losing those arguments." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and be part of a community that cherishes unforgettable tales like this one. Your support means more than you know. It fuels the creation of even more stories that speak to the heart. So, whether you're watching from your TV or your phone, take a moment to join us. Every like, every subscription, every share helps us continue bringing these stories to life. Thank you for being a part of this journey.